While growing up, you were conditioned. Everyone was. And your environment, that means your parents, siblings, or your relatives, they could only condition you with what they had. With what they acquired during their lifetime. If you had a parent that came from the ghetto, but he or she managed to become middle class, and you were conditioned in a middle class fashion, it is because the middle class is what your parent or parents acquired during your lifetime. However, it still remains the fact that you were conditioned with what your parents and your environment had. And they didn't knew everything, and there were times they didn't knew any better. That's just factual. So is it possible? I'm not directly talking about your parents now. I'm talking about the environment where you grew up. Is it possible that you have been set up to be scammed by predators? Could it be that some of those manners that you were raised with are traps? When folks encounter behavior of someone else that they consider disturbing, they tend to say things like, I wasn't raised like that. Or they tend to compare the behavior that the other is displaying with how they were conditioned. And they tend to seek for comfort in their conditioning. This is what a lot of people do. Now listen to me carefully. Your parents may indeed had the best intentions for you. They may have done whatever they could. Or maybe you had a loving environment in which predators were dealt with instantly. That does not cancel out that your environment may have been scammed. And if they've been scammed, then without being aware of it, they transfer the scam onto you. For example, if you have a society that teaches women that all that men want is sex, nothing more, and that you need to use sex in order to trick a man to be loyal to you. If a society is teaching women this, and they're using quote-unquote bad examples to validate this conditioning, now what's going on? This woman will grow up with standards, with expectations that she will hold on to in order to find the right man. But look at this. The context of the conditioning is a hoax. Because it's not true that the only thing men want is sex. That's not true at all. But she was conditioned in this context. So whatever manner or politeness you learned in this context is a hoax. It will be used against her by predators later on. She has been conditioned to look for a type of man that does not exist. So the only thing a narcissist has to do is to mimic this image of a man, which isn't real, and she is hooked. The man validates her standards, so she becomes interested. And her own interest destroys her, because she doesn't look at the bigger picture. This happens to a lot of women, and some even die in those narcissistic relationships. So this is something quite serious I'm talking about. Examine how you were raised. Examine the context. And really face how you were raised. Where you come from a very loving and close family unit, or you come from the ghetto where there was screaming in the house all the time, it doesn't matter. Examine how you were raised. I'm not talking to children here. Because if you're a child, you shouldn't even be watching these videos of mine. I'm talking to people that are in their mid or late teens, or in the adolescent years, and plain adults. I'm talking to spirit beings who are capable of understanding these things. How you were raised set you up for the traps you would encounter later in life. Okay, let me say it one more time. How you were raised sets you up for the traps you will encounter later in life. Some folks, due to their conditioning, they're able to recognize certain traps. There are other traps they are, they're oblivious towards. And then you have folks who, due to their own acquirements during their lifetime, they can recognize threats far better than those who had a very polite and quote-unquote respectful upbringing. Many folks are scammed by their culture into satanic agreements that destroy them. And I'm not talking about things like honorable suicide that they teach in Japanese culture. I'm not talking about that boys need to suck the cock of an elder to attain his manhood at age 11. This is something that used to be done in some Papuan tribes. And I believe some tribes are still doing it. I hope it's outlawed very soon. I'm not talking about such things. Such things is open and obvious that they don't add up. There are things that you have been conditioned into that if you don't unlearn them, you will be food to predators. I said it. Much of people's issues during their lifetime comes from them not questioning how they were raised. Especially if how they were raised is function of their society. If your parents and your relatives conditioned you in such a manner, and that conditioning works for you mechanically in that society, you tend to think, I was well raised, I ended up well. Well, no, just because you're functional in a setting doesn't mean that that setting is good. That setting itself can be destructive. So if you've been conditioned, and this conditioning enables you to function well in a self-destructive setting, then you didn't end up well. You think you ended up well because you look at the short-term relief. You don't look at the bigger picture. Ask yourself, is it a scam? I'm not saying your relatives, family intentionally scammed you. But if they were scammed, and that's the only thing they knew, then they transferred a scam onto you. Does it automatically make them narcissists or people with malicious intent? No. You ought to ask yourself, is it a scam? A lot of folks don't want to be mentally challenged. They want to be left alone. They want to be relieved. And they keep seeking relief. That's why they surround themselves with people who never challenge them mentally. Now, to some extent, it's understandable that you want people around you that reflect your expectations. That's understandable, but it's not always the wisest thing to do. That's why, after becoming born again, while you're renewing your mind, the Most High will often remove some people from you. Why? Because those people will keep you trapped in a scam. Those people will hinder you from being challenged so because they hinder you from being mentally challenged, they'll also hinder you from walking in freedom. Some folks are scammed into poverty. Others are scammed into slavery, whether it's modern slavery or still physical slavery. Doesn't matter. Others are scammed into divorce. They're scammed into toxic relationship. They're scammed into malicious and abusive parenting styles. A lot of folks have been scammed into so many things, but they just don't see it because they never look at the bigger picture. It's written in the New Testament, test all things to show thyself approved. Hold on a minute. Did it say to test the Bible? Did it say to test the Old Testament? Did it say to test the words of Moses? It didn't specify what to test. It said test all things to show thyself approved. You are approved in Christ. You're not testing things to become approved. It's not like you're taking an exam. Because you're approved, you operate in the approval of Christ. So you test all things. Testing all things isn't questioning all things. To question something and to test something is different. To question something is put a question mark. Anyone can put a question mark at anything. Satan did this in the Garden of Eden. He put a question mark where God placed a period. So it doesn't say question all things and show that self-approved. It says test all things. And another place also says examine yourself to see whether you're in the faith. To test all things simply means you put Christ at the center. You put his vision at the center, his will at the center. And then you look at everything else to see how it relates to Christ's will. If it goes against the will of Christ, it's not in line with him. That's how you test all things. The moment you do this, and you put your relief seeking, your self-validation aside, you'll notice that a lot of stuff that you've been holding on to, a lot of stuff you've been defending, by either walking away or by acting out, are things you can't defend. The only way you could defend them is if you hang around people who are in the same darkness as you were in. And that's what a lot of folks do. They remain around folks that reflect their interior because they don't want to face their interior. So by having folks that reflect it, they feel at ease. Now that's relief, and that will work. But you're still in bondage. You're still trapped. You're still not walking by faith. You're still in darkness. So examine how you were raised. You ought to reflect on it in order to unlearn things you need to unlearn. Well, that's it for now. Keep agreeing with Christ and be at peace.